if you like the way the tone sounds, that's all that matters. You know what I mean? Like if you're happy with it, like I said, like once you get to that level of gear where you can get like a good half stack with Celestions or Sheffields and like buy an amp that you like a nice head or whatever, or even now like a nice processor, like the Quad Cortex or like the Helix or something like that. Like if you can get something like that and get a good sounding tone that you like, that's all that matters. So like I skirted the question by trying to explain away my answer. And the
we
answer
still didn't get an answer, Nick.
well, the answer is, what's your priority?
Okay.
If you're doing something like Jay's doing, where you need to be in the upper parts of the fretboard, buy a more expensive guitar because you're going to lose that. If you're a rhythm guy, you can get away with a cheaper guitar and maybe spend more money on an amp.
Gotcha.
And that would be my answer for that.
Great.
Okay.
Great
Can
answers.
we talk about amps real quick though? You're talking about, because I know they're making really great solid state, like the Orange amp. They have a new solid state amp out, and I haven't played through one yet. I'm hoping to play through one at the local guitar store, Replay Guitar Exchange, coming up when I go there next week, or actually it's this week. Is there a huge difference, Nick? And this is a whole probably different conversation, but tubes versus solid state when we're talking about amplifiers.
Of course it's huge. I mean, with tubes, you get that you get a warmer tone.
Okay.
In my opinion, you know what I mean? You get a rounded out lower mid. There's a reason why when that technology was invented that people have been chasing that tube amp since. You know what I mean? And that's been a standard. Does that mean that there's not a place for solid state? No, there for sure is. And I mean, especially like if you're doing something that's colder sounding, or if you have some kind of modeling. Like I saw a band
right
a couple of years ago, and they all had real high-end amp modelers running through solid state amps, and you can't tell the difference. You know what I mean? Because the technology is there now. So that would be my answer for that. Like, would I record a solid state? Sure. Contextually, if the context was right, you know what I mean? But again, like I don't even really go into the analog world anymore, you know, as far as guitar goes, because what's going on in digital is, you know, I can't remember if we talked about this last time or not, but like this idea of like the old analog guys, like having a mic a cab and get that sound and blah, 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 blah. The sound that they were looking for all along, that they're eventually going to come to, is the one that's on my DI now. You know what I mean?
yeah.
The default sounds that come with like most of these plugins are what these analog guys were looking for all the time. And if they could hear it, they would lose their mind.
Would you say these plugins are kind of like you just said? I think you just said this. That's the end result. What we plug into when we plug the guitar into the interface, pull up our favorite amp sim and play through that Mesa sim or whatever it is, 5150. That's the end result that we were looking for recording that tube amp, right? Just a lot less work.
If you zoom out enough, then that's it. Like all I care about is the record and how does it sound.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you can get a good sound doing what you're doing, great. If I can get a good, like at the end of the day, like if I record a record, and I go through this, and you know, I've talked to Ken about this a bunch. I think we even talked about it last time. We were talking about like analog versus in the box recording, where people are always talking about how good their $5,000 compressor is, and I'm like, that's cool. Does anyone notice it on the record? Or people like, holy shit, man, that's incredible. Like, how did you get that sound? He said, well, I can only get the sound with this compressor, versus the guy that works in the box that has an equally good sounding record. Wow. Like nobody gives a fuck outside of us.
Right.
It's just to sell gear, dude. At the end of the day, like if it sounds good, it is good.
So that brings up another point, you know, and maybe this is for all you guitar players listening out there. And it's hard for us to adapt new things and change sometimes. I get that, totally get that. I've had many flaws in my thinking over the years as a musician in other areas too. But you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, am I writing a record for just musicians and guitar players so they can say, oh, what a great tone. How'd you get that tone? Or are you writing a record for people that like that style of music? I think there's a little bit different mindset that goes on there.
Well, that's a whole rabbit hole of a conversations and musicians playing to musicians.
Right. Yeah.
Some great memes about that. But I mean, that's been a thing. We've been playing for other musicians our whole lives, but it's so funny when another musician walks in the room, the way you're playing changes.
Oh man,
you know. But I mean that like we were talking about before the podcast, Jay, about expectations and managing before you even go into the situation that you're going into, having a vanishing point that's way down, obviously in the distance of, again, know thyself. What are you writing for? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of this record you're writing? Is it music inside you that just needs to come out? You've always wanted to write. Like that's the best, that's the shit. If you're writing it to go on the radio, that's fine. But you know what I mean? We have to have a conversation. And
right.
You know what I mean? Like all those things are really, really important to consider, I think. So.
Everything with intention.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that a lot.
At least, some forethought into it. Whether or not it executes that way is another story, but you know what I mean? Like you could have all the best intentions in the world and have it turn out like dog shit, and vice versa. You can go into it totally blind and come up with the most amazing thing ever. But
back to the conversation of working with your engineer and other professionals rather than working against them. I always tell myself I don't want to be my own weakest link. So if we're in the studio and Nick were to say to me, hey man, I would say, hey, you know what, Nick, just change the tone to whatever you think fits best. I'm just going to play the music and I'm going to trust your judgment on that. Unless it's something I just completely don't like, but I really can't imagine that being the case with you because you mix rock and metal music. So, and I think and I'm not saying you have to take all of that, right? I mean, maybe there's something I might want to change, but again, working with your sound engineer and the producer versus working, against them. I think that's an important takeaway.
Sure. And again, it's the same concept as, getting that initial tone and then leaving it alone. You know what I mean? Like, I think in having a conversation of like, look, is this tone going to sound good in the mix? Like, what are we searching for in the mix? And like, there's all different levels of that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons that you try to find a producer who's like-minded. Like, I mean, if you come in to do a metal record with me of any genre of metal, like I guarantee you it's not going to sound like shit. Same thing with a rock record and stuff like that. You know what I mean? If you describe your vision to me, like we'll get it done. But I'm all about healthy feedback. I'm not about nitpicking feedback.
Be sure to listen to the entire podcast on metalmastermind.com. You can just click on podcast there or go to Spotify or Google Play. There are links in the description of this video. I want to say thank you so much for supporting and being a part of Metal Mastermind. And hey, drop us a comment if you have some things that you would like for us to cover in future podcasts. We'll see you on the next show. And remember, create your own sound and style.